So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this panel. It's on sustainability in action, tools and best practices for impactful change. And we hope you can learn about resources and approaches that are helping organizations develop and advance their sustainability plans. Thank you to the Brampton Board of Trade for organizing this event and for giving us this opportunity to engage on this topic. My name is Chaya Chengappa, and I am a program manager with Partners in Project Green, which is brought to you by the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority and Toronto Pearson. And I work collaboratively with multi-stakeholders across the GTA to advance sustainability, specifically on water stewardship and waste management. Today, I'm joined by three accomplished panelists who bring a wealth of expertise. We have two solutions providers. There's Bruce Taylor from Enviro Stewards and Sanders Lazier from Carbonhound. And they will share on how they're supporting organizations across Canada with decarbonization and cost savings. And our third panelist is Karen Yoshiki Graveisins from Magellan Aerospace, who will share the achievements and the lessons learned from their sustainability journey. So thank you all for your time today. And we hope to have some time for questions from the audience at the end. So let me start by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their organizations and to tell us how your organization is putting sustainability into action and what are the key factors that are driving these efforts. Karen, can I start with you?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen. I work for Magellan Aerospace. Magellan Aerospace designs, engineers, and manufactures aircraft engines and structural components and assemblies for customers such as Boeing, GE, Rolls-Royce, and Airbus. I started my career at Magellan at the Orenda plant in Mississauga about 30 years ago, and it was one of the first companies that was acquired by Magellan. And we have grown globally since then. We've got 4 operations in Canada, 6 locations in the US, and a number of plants in the UK, France, India, and Poland. I was very fortunate to be involved in the environmental due diligence process, when our Mississauga facility and other plants were acquired. And it was a wonderful opportunity to establish standard tools and methods for us to identify how our activities impact the environment and how to put appropriate levels of controls in place. So I'll start with our sustainability journey and just talk about Magellan's goal, first of all. Our goal is to grow and to be a sustainable business. And like many businesses, sustainability means reducing costs, being more profitable, winning new contracts, and compensating our employees more. I think it is mistakenly perceived that sustainability indicators like environmental, social, and governance indicators are non-financial and are disconnected from business sustainability. The perception is that we require additional company resources to be sustainable. But this thinking is similar to the old term cost of quality, which some of you might be familiar with. And it suggests that additional labor and material are required to make quality product. Now we more accurately refer to this as the cost of poor quality. It's a cost to fix a part that can be eliminated if we make that part right the first time. So at Magellan, our sustainability strategy is rather like the chicken and egg. We use ESG to make us more competitive, and we use our competitiveness to foster ESG. When starting the sustainability journey, and even to keep the momentum going, it is critical that decision makers in the company understand that the things we do to be sustainable as a business also make us more sustainable on the environmental, social, and governance fronts. I think we need to be mindful of this in our internal communications and try to connect the dots for our employees so that we are all aligned in our continuous improvement efforts. That's me.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thanks. Yeah. Hello. So I'm Bruce Taylor, the founder of Enviro Stewards. I'm a chemical engineer. This is Enviro Stewards' 25th anniversary. And so this type of work, it changes names every 5 years. it's basically common sense, and right now we're calling it decarbonization. We used to call it eco-efficiency, pollution prevention. And basically what we do is we focus on kind of root cause. So what job is the energy solving for you? What job is the water solving for you? How do we solve that job differently? And this is how you get profoundly different results. So say like Southbrook Winery in Niagara-on-Lake, if you've ever been on winery tours, they're the organic one, they got a big long wall. But anyway, they just had an energy audit done by somebody else. That was a subsidized one by the utility provider. And they found you're already LEED Gold certified, that's great. Your next 5% is a 20-year payback. So they said, okay, we're going to do solar panels, because that was a 7-year payback. But before they did that, they hired us to just, can you take a look also? Sure. Actually, it's not a 5% saving, it's a 40% savings. And it's not a 20-year payback, it's a 4-month payback. And this comes from the deep dive kind of stuff that I'd advocate for is the very first thing you need is a really good plan, right? Then you can execute the plan, but a lot of people just start by implementing the wrong plan, which is much more expensive overall than figuring out in the first place. So that's just an example, but the types of work we do, so lately we're helping a lot of people get to zero carbon. Let me just see if this works. Yeah. So this is kind of a illustration of how we do that. So we had helped Maple Leaf Foods. So Maple Leaf Foods, they're the world's first large food company to be carbon neutral. It's not 2030, not 2050, 2019. It didn't cost them money. They report that they've saved $17 million so far, and they're carbon neutral. This has to do with the approach. Most people start the approach with how do we procure the energy differently? Solar panels, wind. First, cut, right? So in our case, first you can figure out where you are, and then what are the quick win, easy stuff, and what's the strategic stuff that is going to address your largest part of your problem. So first of all, you figure out where your major scope 1, 2, and 3, your electricity, your gas, your ingredients, and then what are the most strategic things, and you find what do you do with those, right? You get them implemented, and you see these sensors. You put them on at the beginning. They're going to tell you where you're starting from. They're going to track your progress. They're going to give you an alarm when you lose your progress. They're going to verify your progress when you report later on to avoid, right? And, at the last mile, you're replacing what's left, but a much smaller amount. So our own office, we've cut it 90% per employee through conservation. Then we offset the remainder, which is much more credible and much more cost effective than offsetting everything every year, right? And so that's kind of our thing. And we also do kind of wastewater treatment, water treatment. We're a B Corp. So we take some of the revenue from what we just described and we do development work. We teach people in East Africa how to build water purifiers with the local materials. We can make them there for $100 US. They save an average family there $40 per year for 25 years. So basically you're leaving $1,000 in the pockets of the poorest of the poor on the planet by giving them safe water. And so they kind of tie together because you're avoiding deforestation by not boiling to make water. So anyway, that's kind of our business model. And so it's kind of this integrated model.
Sentence. Thank you.
I have to go after you, do I, Bruce? I'm Sanj Lazier, so I'm the CEO and founder of Carbonhound. So we're a technology solution. So really the problem that we're trying to solve for is that, frankly, how do we empower businesses of all sizes to be able to understand and report? So going back to that chart there, you'll notice that the first step was measurement, right? And so, establishing that baseline and helping businesses understand where those impacts are coming from is critical in order to make a good plan. Mm-hmm. And so what we noticed was that there's really big barriers around expertise, capital, and I think a third one that we kind of uncovered was that 93% of our customers weren't able to even get through this first phase because of the challenges around collecting data. So that's something that we really focused on and created a lot of automation around that data collection process to make it much easier for businesses of all sizes. We have companies from 2 employees up to almost 5,000 employees across multiple countries and regions now. So it's for us really about accessibility and giving everybody the tools to be able to take real change into their business and make sure that they're enabling their team with the knowledge and expertise to be able to think about where these reductions can come from. And I think that's why I have a lot of respect for what Bruce does, because I think we kind of work hand in hand, really, because at the end of the day, you do want real engineering. It's helpful to have engineering experience, especially dealing in manufactured goods and processes, to help identify those decarbonization wins that will save you huge amounts of money. So I think it's like really that combination of kind of technology and expertise that I feel like combines to create a lot of value for businesses that are trying to make action. So we really do our best to try to make sure that that's accessible for folks.
Thank you. Thanks, Sanders. So my next question is to you, Karen. What are the biggest challenges your organization has faced with turning sustainability goals into action? And can you speak specifically to tools or best practices that you've utilized to help overcome these challenges?
So like many companies, Magellan uses key performance indicators to tell us how we are performing. Measures like gross margin and inventory turns are financial performance indicators, but they are also indicative of how efficient or inefficient our processes are running. And these inefficiencies can be translated into amounts of CO2, amounts of water, and amounts of waste. Magellan has made significant reductions in wastewater and greenhouse gases, but it requires a constant reminder to employees that there is a connection between these environmental performance indicators and operational efficiency measures. If you consider the impact of an efficiency improvement that reduces the number of machining hours, there is the obvious reduction in CO2 associated with the electricity that you've saved, but the reduction in hours might also reduce bottlenecks on the shop floor. It might reduce clutter in inventory, improve the safety of our employees, increase capacity of the factory so that we can win new work and have more cash available to invest training in our employees and provide support to the communities in which we operate. The big challenge for us is fostering a culture of continual improvement and getting engagement from everyone. What is helping us is having a framework for ESG-type continual improvement. All our divisions are registered to ISO 14001, the ISO standard for environmental management systems, and we're also aligned to 45001, the occupational health and safety management system. And both of these standards require establishing top-level EHS objectives with clear baselines and targets. For example, our corporate greenhouse gas objective is to reduce greenhouse gases by 55% by 2030 against a 2008 baseline. Our progress is presented to the board of directors, it's tracked and posted on the Magellan website, and each division identifies the actions it has to take to reach the target and tracks them to completion. And it's the rigor of having standardized reporting and accountability that have made the program successful. The Mississauga plant has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions from 8,000 tons in 2008 to 1,000 tons in 2023. A significant reduction was achieved in 2019 when the building footprint was reduced from 750,000 square feet to 250,000 square feet. But not all companies have the option to reduce their building footprint so significantly. And we were not convinced that much more could be done in terms of building efficiency at the Mississauga plant. But an audit of one's energy, waste, and water usage is a great tool to identify opportunities for reduction. We perform our own annual waste audits as per Ontario Regulation 102 and execute our action plan. Enviro Stewards and the Region Appeal conducted a water usage audit and recommended a number of ways to reduce our water consumption. And as part of our participation in the Mississauga Climate Leaders Program, a comprehensive site assessment report was provided by partners in Project Green, which detailed potential savings in gas, electricity, greenhouse gas, and costs, and also outlined available incentives and a sustainability roadmap. So in 2024, the Mississauga plant took action on the recommendations and replaced 450 fluorescent lamps with LED lighting at the workbenches, installed lighting timers throughout the plant, and through the water savings project, installed timers and valves on makeup water for the rinse water tanks. I understand that there's plans this year to take advantage of Enbridge's energy saving incentive to better manage the makeup air that's brought into the building and reduce heating and cooling costs. And next year, we are considering a building automation system to improve the efficiency of our HVAC systems. To get new projects, Magellan runs an annual Big Idea contest throughout the corporation. Employees are encouraged to submit ideas that undergo a financial analysis and demonstrate improvement in each of the categories of energy efficiency, quality, collaboration, and employee morale, and environmental health and safety awareness. Employees are awarded cash prizes and are given recognition by the president. It is hoped that initiatives like this will grow a workforce of engaged, trained, skilled people who stay with Magellan and continue to deliver quality product in line with our vision of business sustainability. And I'd just like to end with a comment about operational excellence. It's said that if one were to map all the activity that's required to make a product from the purchase of the raw material all the way to the delivery of that finished product to the customer, typically less than 5% of that activity is considered value added. What an opportunity to reduce costs, energy, and greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Karen. So I think what I heard was standardized protocol, reporting, the baseline, of course, establishing the baseline, having a sustainability plan, and of course, employee engagement.
Yes.
With this overarching theme of continuous improvement. at Magellan.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
My next question is to you, Sanders, first, and then Bruce. It's the same question. What are some of the biggest challenges you see businesses face when implementing sustainability actions? And how have you worked with them to overcome these challenges and help drive meaningful change? Sanders?
Looking at Bruce, I think you said my name. Yeah. So I think maybe just starting off with one thing I didn't touch on in my first question. I think the drivers for a lot of our business are we get a combination of folks who you're looking at a world where you've got about 55,000 companies that have supply chains that are being pressured by regulatory states, whether it's in the EU, parts of the US, Canada, and that creates a lot of pressure on their supply chains on purpose, right? And so what we're seeing is an increasing amount of really green procurement strategies that a lot of these businesses are taking. So if you're looking to do business with the government, in many cases, anyone in the Fortune 5000, et cetera, people are getting caught up and getting asked questions that they don't know what the answer is to, right? How can I set SBTI standards? What does SBTI even mean? How many more three-letter acronyms am I gonna have to learn to service this client? You know, why is it that that our deal is getting stuck in procurement? Because they're asking for CDP, yet another three-letter acronym. You know, so there's all of this language and terminology that's been created, and the result, it's purely a result of the fact that we live in a very low trust, high expectation environment for businesses, right? And so we've had to establish all these different standards and requirements in order to bridge that gap. And so as a result, a lot of clients come to us saying, we don't know what any of this means. You know, how do we solve this? So expertise and just frankly understanding, like, what is it that your biggest customer wants from you? And why is it that they want that from you? Because when they're staring at a Costco and a Walmart that makes up 60% of their revenue and they're asking you for this information and you don't even know what it means, that's a pretty scary place to be. And so I'd say, like, the biggest barrier that we're dealing with initially is definitely just kind of breaking down that problem with them, helping them understand where it's coming from. And then the second piece is, you know, it's Costco and Walmart today. Like, is it going to be at my other 10 customers tomorrow? You know, is this just a flash in the pan? Is it going to be all the time? What does this mean for how we think about, you know, our product? Is it no longer just about price and quality anymore? Like, how does the sustainability aspects of our product win as RFPs and help us win more deals and grow our business? So I think there's a lot of these commercial drivers that people are starting to figure out that are quite tied. And to the point that, you know, we're making over is that it also comes back to competitiveness. Like, people are looking to buy more products. Like, there's a graphite mining company out of Montreal, right? They produce a product that's more expensive than anywhere else in the world because China is the only other place really that has 90% of the graphite mining. but they electrified their mine, and now they've got signed agreements with world leaders like Panasonic, et cetera, right? So, what we're starting to see is that it's no longer just about price and quality. It's also about the green components of what you do. And a big part of that is how do you prove those claims? Because there's increasingly more and more greenwashing regulations out there that you need to adhere to. So how do you credibly go about claiming, a win in the competitive market so that you can build your business for the future? And so I'd say those are the big challenges are, how do we do this? How do we do it credibly? And then how do we operationalize this? Because a lot of the businesses we deal with, they don't have full-time sustainability staff, right? Like these are not companies that have 10, 15 people on staff. They're not a bank that has a team bigger than most sustainability companies. They're working on this stuff. So how can they do this off the side of their desk? How can they do it in a way that enables the people in the business rather than creating a new siloed function to run this? And so really that's where we see our role is helping enable all of that and make it simple for them to be able to address those challenges and make sure that they're meeting those stakeholder expectations, which could be investors, could be customers, could be even employees. We see a lot of customers who, are in professional services. I'm sure Bruce would agree, like at least in my business, like people care about this stuff. And when talent is your number one asset, you need to think about how you're actually living your values and driving those forward. And there's no better way of doing that than measuring, keeping yourself accountable, and setting yourself goals.
That's great.
Bruce, what are some of the key challenges you see businesses face?
Yeah, with what you said, one of the things when you're working on environment, it's on everybody's list somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not the top of the list for everybody, but it's on their list at least. So it's a really good way to collaborate across silos in your organization. And so our tagline is engineering change, and engineering is the easy part, literally, right? And so
true.
when we find these things, often we're frustrated, like the hardest things for companies to implement are the easiest things to implement. The tough ones, they have a whole procurement process. This is a 5-year payback. We're going to shave it like this. We're going to get this, right? But if it's a 1-week payback, let's get 3 quotes. Let's spend 6 months, right? Whatever you do, you're going to spend 10 times more than you would get if you just implemented it. And so they don't have this capacity to implement the easy stuff. And so that's why we work with them on change management kind of things. But another gap is a lack of awareness of what something actually costs them. So we did an ice cream factory. We said, what's this dumpster? Oh, don't worry, the pig farmer takes it for free. Okay. Did you know there's actually $5 million per year of ice cream in that dumpster? Yes, he's taking it for free. Wouldn't you rather have $5 million of ice cream to sell, right? And so let's go back. The dumpster is too late. Let's go back in the process. Where did you lose it? What was it worth just before you lost it? And what can we do differently, right? And so that's a lot of the change management. Another one would be, say, Campbell Soup had a factory here in Toronto, and we did what's called a process integration study. So you find everything in the whole factory that has to be cooled down. You find everything in the whole factory that has to be warmed up, and you do this matchmaking game. Let's heat this with this and cool this with that and that kind of thing. $1.8 million per year of opportunity of water and energy. And then they said, can you do a solid waste audit? Sure. 20 minutes later, don't bother. Why not? Our solid waste company's going to do it for free. Okay. 2 months later, can you do a solid waste audit? Well, what happened the last one? Well, they did the audit. They said 99% is already diverted to waste energy. Divert the other 1% and you're done. So we came in, we found $700,000 a year of food that didn't have to be wasted in the first place, which was 4,000 tons less carbon than making energy out of that food because the footprint to make food is so good back at the agricultural step. And so a lot of that had to do with the valuation. So you're making chunky soup, you put the expensive bits in the can, the meat, potatoes, whatnot, you check the weight, put the broth in, pasteurize it, sell it. So during changeovers, there was 13 tons per year being left on the belts over the course of the year. You say, okay, it's $100 a ton to send it to the waste energy plant. It's 13, that's $1,300. Why are you wasting our time? Because it costs you $10,000 to buy the chicken plus $100 to destroy the chicken. Now for $131,000, can we modify the system so we run a broth at the same time and stop putting it on the belt? And so the first thing you have to do is raise the awareness level of the actual economics of what it is, right? If you're paying a sewer surcharge, we did a brewery in BC, and they said, don't come. Why not? Head office is making us bring you in, but we don't want you. We don't care about food loss. Okay, what do you care about? Sewer surcharge, we're paying several $100,000 a year of sewer surcharge. Okay, did you know it takes 20 liters of beer to make $1 of sewer surcharge? You're worried about the 700,000, what about the beer? Oh, okay, so then we went in and found them ways to basically improve their beer yield. And so it's a very, you know, whatever you're gonna do in the last part of the journey, the first part of the journey is the same. This deep conservation is under 2 years, very often under 1 year, and very often under a week to just not use it in the first place. And so we encourage people to get started and, you know, bring in the stakeholders. You know, a lot of the work might be just getting everybody to agree that you can change this in this way, right?
Yeah.
Actually implementing is pretty easy, but getting everybody on board is the interesting part.
There's one company we were walking through, and we asked them what was the most effective energy conservation initiative you've ever made. And I was telling this to Christy, and they had 140 some odd lines of products that they were putting out in that one factory floor.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we just asked people to turn off their machines at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And it was a 10% energy savings on
exactly.
the year.
Yep, exactly. We did a packaging plant, and their CNCs and what are using more energy when they weren't running than when they were. Like the rate was lower, but it was 2 shifts a day plus the weekend.
Yeah.
Added up to more energy than when they're actually running the factory.
Well, like our data shows that even just purely by observation effect, people save about 14% or so on their energy costs.
Wonderful, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those examples. I think what's clear is you need to understand the problem in the first place. So that seems to be the first step.
Yep.
Really understand what you can do, what the problem is, and then how can you solve it. And then, of course, the whole issue of collaboration, engagement, and convincing the organizations to take those steps. And then thank you, Sanders, for bringing up the credibility issue as well. That seems to be a new problem that we are facing with. I think we have time for one more question before I go to questions from the audience. So this is to all panelists, and maybe Karen, you can start us off, then Bruce and Sanders. What practical advice do you have for businesses that are looking to get started? So you have done so much, and you've got that experience on making these impactful changes with their sustainability strategies.
Right. So I think when a company is first putting together its sustainability strategy, it's really important to establish a multifunctional team. So you've got like your finance representation, communications, environmental health and safety, you've got HR, and you've got contracts there. And then you start with what you already have in place, because there is so much that's already been done that can be translated into an energy savings or a sustainability type initiative. We used a recognized ESG framework to help us organize all our activities. It was the World Economic Forum 2020 white paper, and it lists about 21 different ESG metrics and organizes them into sustainability, environmental, people, and prosperity. So what we did is we took all our initiatives and put them under these categories, and then did a gap analysis of what we still had to do. We ran a very, very simple materiality analysis and looked at what is the severity or exposure to the company and how likely is this going to happen. Just very simple, high, medium, low, and then we were able to prioritize our actions to take. I had some other stuff written here, but I want to change what I'm going to say because it was so interesting what I'm hearing from my fellow panelists here. I think we can all agree that people are very passionate about the environment, and it affects us in different ways. So one way to get people engaged, to get those ideas of what we should be working on at the facility, is just to appeal to that. People care about the environment, right? And so if you can get them energized about that, you get ideas. They work with the parts. They know what they're doing. They can give you ideas of how to fix things. And then you've got a different level within the organization. For example, if you go right up to the board, they care about shareholder value, right? So it's a matter of showing that operationally the initiatives that we're taking really do have a translation into sustainability. We talk about things like, turning lights off and the building envelope and those overhead type costs, but I think that we need to strengthen that relationship of how we actually manufacture things and how that impacts the environment. And I'll just give an example. One of our initiatives, right, which was put in place, nothing to do with sustainability, was to reduce scrap and rework. So what we want to do is manufacture a part right the first time, right? And so, we boast about, oh yeah, we reduced our scrap rate by this saved X amount of dollars. But what we didn't do, and what we're doing now, is what does that mean in terms of CO2? Right? And it's taking that, and so it's like a win-win situation. These are things you're doing anyway. A business is doing this to be competitive, right? But you can also advertise it as sustainability as well. And I think that's really key, because you need support from management and from your board in order to do these initiatives. And if you can speak in that language to them, you will get that support.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I like what you just said about that. One of the nice things about ESG is it's a way to align what you're already doing. Like we did a pharmaceutical company, and they're saying what is ESG and whatnot, but basically they didn't see, oh, we don't care about that, we care about money. So, well, what's your corporate mission? Oh, it's to make the world a healthier year. That's social, right? And so, and what are you doing on that? And so the things you're already doing, can we align them around that kind of thing is one thing. And so where to start, I think, is to do the actual, like Brampton, PPG just had the thing this morning for, quick walkthrough. One of the best benefits is to just open eyes, there's opportunity here. You're not going to find it on the 2-hour walkthrough, but you're going to find that it's worthwhile to do it, right? Unless you're small. If you're small, that might be enough or whatever. If you're big, though, you at least see, this is the size of the prize, let's go after it, kind of thing. And so this awareness is very key, right? And then just get started. And so say like the Campbell's example, when we started, they had 200 ideas in their, literally, in their suggestion box, which is paralyzing. So of that, what are the 10 things that you really should do that are going to get you that 1.8 million, right? And so to really sort through what a good plan is and then just start implementing it, kind of thing. Another thing that came to mind is just the competitive advantage you actually have in Ontario, in Manitoba, Quebec. Our energy, so we're doing 7 Unilever factories all over North America. The Toronto one is the easiest one to get to zero, because the electricity in Ontario is only 10% fossil fuel. If you electrify in Chicago, your emissions are higher than before you electrified, because of the way they get their electricity. So take advantage of what you have here, right? And so there's an opportunity to, reduce your thermal as much as possible. All the electricity you bought turned into heat, literally. Then you're paying to get rid of that heat from a cooling tower in some other way. Instead of paying to get rid of the heat, why don't we reuse the heat instead of buying other heat? So reuse it as much as possible, then you go to the more expensive stuff, but start with this deep conservation. Everybody can get behind because of the economic, environment, social benefit.
Thank you, Bruce. Sanders, practical advice to get started?
So I got into this, 4 years ago with the help of a U of T professor. And I think the most amazing part about being in this community is truly how collaborative everybody is. And to the point I think you made earlier, building that team internally, you'll be shocked at how many people from every walk of your business want to be involved with this. It's really fun because I work with a lot of green teams at the businesses that we serve. We've got almost 200 customers now. And, you'll have a guy who does welding on one of the machines, you'll have the CFO, and you'll have somebody from sales on the same call, right? And I just don't think there's very many initiatives that pull together people from all those different areas. And so I think really to that point is, and you keep saying it over and over again, it's just get started. Like, I think there's a lot of inertia and fear around doing anything about this stuff. Like, it doesn't need to be high stress. Like, just get a group of people together and start doing something and starting to create some energy in your organization. Get look at people like Bruce and Enviro Stewards. Like, we help out a lot of businesses at the beginning of their journey just to, if you want to start getting more informed, like Karen was talking about, where, I kind of wish I had the data to start from, so that maybe we could have spent that time a little bit more effectively on areas that would have moved the needle a little bit more at the start, and identified that low-hanging fruit earlier. So I would say, like, it doesn't need to be complicated. Just get a group of people together, pull together some of the ideas, and start measuring things, and just go from there. Like, it doesn't need to be complicated. And then as things change, your ambition level can change too, because you'll learn more about what you can and what you can't do, and you'll learn about what's expensive and what's easy. And and the other thing you'll do is you start proving yourself out. So as Karen said, like, look at these amazing benefits that her organization has seen. And all of a sudden, your CFO is looking at you like you're the next coming of, whoever, because there's a whole new way to innovate on your business model by thinking about it through that sustainability lens, through the lens that Bruce is talking about. So, I think for us, it's just been about, like, how do you think more cyclically? How do you think? How do you? I'm not sure if you read Donut Economics. It's a really cool book. You should definitely read it. It's all about, how do we think about things in a more cyclical way, rather than purely like from a consumption perspective and waste perspective. So it kind of really changes how organizations think and go about their work. And for many people, that's really exciting. So I would say get a green team together, start chatting about it, and then start measuring things.
Thank you. So it's starting small with simple steps, and it's all about measurement and getting, I think, employees engaged, because everybody cares about the environment. So it's not as difficult as you think it is to get started. Do we have any questions from the audience? We can take a few. Sure, 1 second. There's a mic coming to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, everyone. I guess a question directed to you, Sanders. I'm hearing what a large company is doing. So what are the small companies doing? You said you have teams of people that are working with companies that are just 2 people and up. For them, I think it can sometimes be daunting, thinking, I don't have the time to put together a team and to go after this. So what's some of those initiatives that you can say to smaller and medium-sized businesses to get started at this?
I think the cool part of being a really small business sometimes is that there actually aren't that many variables, right? Like, your operations aren't going to be incredibly complex. So it's actually easier often to get started. And the other cool thing, like, we had one company that was a manufacturer, right? And they were just getting started. And for them, this was actually a question of, okay, how can we be sustainable first, so that as we scale more efficiently, our numbers look better to investors, we've got that credibility from the beginning. Because in many, I think the struggle a lot of these companies have is they've got this huge inertia problem they're trying to solve for. And so in terms of initiatives with smaller businesses, again, like, I really think it's about really just measuring things to start and watching your carbon intensity as you grow. And that gives you a good indication, because I think the main goal for most businesses, my goal for most businesses that we work with, is how do you detach growth from environmental impact? Because that often has a co-benefit of decreased costs as well. And so if you're really small, it's about start getting those data points earlier, so that you can start to see how you're trending in terms of your carbon intensity as you grow, and measuring that efficiency of operations too. So it's kind of putting those good habits in place to start. And also, it creates a whole bunch of benefits from the perspective of, if you're thinking in a more circular way, then that all of a sudden becomes stories that you can tell as part of your branding and help differentiate you in the market as well. So I think there's a lot of untold stories that kind of Bruce was mentioning, that companies who have the data can feel a lot more confident in telling. And when you're a new entrant and you're a smaller business in the market, you have to differentiate in some way, right? And so I think thinking about how you can do that with your sustainability initiatives, again, it doesn't need to be complicated. Like, it depends, and it's kind of hard for me to answer that, to be honest, because it totally depends on what type of business you are, right? Like, if you're a consultant, it's gonna be very different from if you're a small food manufacturer. So happy to chat afterwards if that's something that you're going through. But yeah, it's certainly, I think, again, I'm very biased because I run a carbon accounting business, but I do believe that it starts with measurement, and that unlocks a lot of business value for organizations moving forward.
Not sure if you guys want to add.
Could I
Any
just
other-
add to that one? Yeah, Magellan, like, we have 18 divisions, but some of our divisions have 30 people in them. But there's one thing that kind of brings it all together, and that is, it's really important. I agree with you totally, Sanders, about data, having that data to start with, but it's also having that framework, because you could have like someone working on this, and you got some data there, and you got some data here, and you got some data there, but it's like coming up with this higher level objective. What do I want to do as a company? And then focusing and getting, like, joining all the dots and getting all the pieces together, so you have got this really nice picture or this really nice message to give, for your company. But it does start with data, definitely, but the people aspect of it, getting that engagement. And another thing about data, as good as it is, if you don't do anything with the data, you might as well not have got the data, right? And in order to keep that momentum going, you need to have engaged people. And that is something I think that Magellan struggles with, to keep that momentum going, right? Yeah.
Yeah, on that one too, I met Jay Paul this morning, and he's mentioning his wife works with Making Waves Swim School. And coincidentally, we actually did a job there. So there's maybe, a dozen swim instructors, lifeguards kind of thing. But an interesting one was, we have a permanent logger on their dehumidifier. And we can send them a text message if somebody doesn't put the cover on the pool at night, because the difference on the dehumidifier is so large from that water evaporating. You lose that water and the energy in that water, plus the energy to take it out. And so things can be done automated on a small scale on the key levers that you can pull. But you're right, a lot of factories have so much data, but nobody's actually looking at it. So, whenever we install a meter, we always the engineer has to say why they're putting a meter there, right? Otherwise, why are we putting a meter there? Because data is valuable if it's used correctly. Yeah, but your percentage saving is smaller, but it still makes a big difference to your bottom line. It's just a smaller absolute number than a big company. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for the panel? No? I think you have one more? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going.
I was wondering, because I work in the same area, so some of the questions are generic, but I was wondering what's your feeling on regulatory moving towards this? Because in my opinion, I don't see enough regulatory change in the Canadian environment pushing these things forward. And so what are some things that you would say out there to politicians as we're going into a major election next week, to move the needle forward? Because I see it in the European environment, but I don't see it in the Canadian context. So I wonder what's your thoughts on how to make that happen.
Who wants to take that?
I can start. Or do you want to start?
No, you go
Karen.
ahead, go ahead. No, okay, I agree with you that Canadian legislation is behind. And I think with the recent change in government in the U.S. as well, that, we're starting to see, certain aspects of our sustainability policy that are impacted. But because we are global, it's the European legislation that's driving us. And so what we don't have is, okay, they're going to work to this standard over there, we'll work to a different standard here. So that is, I guess, raising the bar for all our divisions. And at the end of the day, we there's so much like global type trading and communication and interaction that it's going to all affect us anyway. Like, for example, European legislation, they're requiring suppliers, right, to provide that kind of information to them. So if you provide, commodities or raw material to the European community, you're required to provide all that information now, like your CO2 information, right? And so you need to be able to have your systems in place to tabulate that.
I know a lot is to, in the absence of regulation, to take advantage of the voluntary initiative. Like, let's say you're a small supplier. Say we did Chudley Pies, actually. They make apple pie in Milton. And Walmart came out with, okay, we're having this big carbon thing, you know, and so then Walmart ends up promoting this tiny pie company from Milton because of their vendors, they're the only ones who actually have the data of what they're doing, and you know what I mean? So there's a real advantage with your suppliers to be ahead on this instead of behind on this. And even on your own staff, people like to do stuff voluntarily rather than being pushed. And so a lot of this is kind of, it's going to protect every job in this factory by reducing the margin. And we can take some of that margin and put it into wages or something else. And so Chris and I were just chatting this morning about incentives. So on the other side of regulation is just incentives. It doesn't have to be big, but an incentive is a reason to do something now, right? So even these large companies will go to their management to say, hey, we can get this tiny amount that's going to help us do this. Let's do this now, even though they could have paid for it 100 times themselves. And so there's this role of kind of incentivizing the correct things and getting the right message out. There's very little messaging on conservation, right? There's a lot of messaging on how to sequester carbon or, you know, the end of the mile and, you know, the worst thing you could actually do versus the best thing you could actually do. And so get the message right, I guess.
So in terms of how we can push it, I think in many ways, Canada is a receiver, not a giver of regulations, right? Like our market is extractive and export based. So we are going to be most influenced by those around us to the point that I think both of you are making, really. So when we look at the regulatory landscape worldwide, you've basically got 3 different flavors of regulations that are impacting Canadian companies. You've got greenwashing regulations, which kind of speak for themselves. You have to have data to back up your claims. So if you want to sell as a business in any of these countries, then you need to be adhering to that, right? Even if you don't have a presence in that country and you're selling to them, okay? Second type is mandatory reporting that's kind of government-based as it relates to like corporate reporting, right? And so that's the CSRDs of the world where you've got those 55, 70,000 companies that are going to be required to report on their supply chains, and so they come to all their customers. And Canada obviously being at the end of the supply chain sometimes, we're going to get hit by that. The third type is what Karen was talking about, which is called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So these are basically tariffs that are being put on high-intensity goods that are entering into places like the EU. And so what they do is they say, okay, if you're bringing in, right now the number is 150 euros, I repeat, 150 euros worth of materials that are high intensity, whether it's fertilizer, steel, aluminum, etc., you have to disclose that and you get tariffed on it at the same rate that the producers in the EU get tariffed on their emissions. Okay, so it's the same cost of carbon that the EU companies face. This is a really, really interesting one. The reason why I'm talking about it a bit more is because Carney actually has this in his plan as well. So this very quickly could become a reality that we face too. And the reason they're doing that is to reduce basically leakage, right? So they don't want because fundamentally, if we look at the history of time, you know, it's basically exploiting low labor costs and the environment that are the reason why we can get low cost goods from elsewhere into Canada, right? And so by having this carbon border adjustment mechanism, what it does is it tries to at least normalize for the environmental aspect of that so that all of our steel manufacturers and everyone else don't just disappear and go off to whatever country has the lowest environmental standards and then import it back in, right? So we do need to figure out ways to normalize for these factors, environment being one of them, in order to create a stronger manufacturing center here. So long story short, I think implementing solutions like that will also make it easier to trade with the EU. So as we start looking at what the tariff impact is going to be on Canadian customers, we need to be aligning more to the locations that we want to move to. You know, China just announced they're going to be net zero. Like Xi Jinping, for the first time, committed to that in the world stage, right? So, and talked about their plan yesterday, I think it was. So, you know, there is a global realignment happening. Climate problem isn't going away anytime soon. And so I think what's going to happen is we're either going to get leadership that is going to push that forward from a political perspective, like Carney might with his carbon border adjustment mechanism to align to where the future is, or we're going to be forced to do it anyways because of all the people that we do business with.
Any other questions? One last question? No?
I can mention the draw.
Yeah. Bruce, I was going to come to that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you can
Oh,
please.
sorry. I don't know how to.
This is fun.
You have, Bruce has some resources, I think, that he wants to share. No, this isn't here. It's at the PPG table.
Right, I
Yeah,
thought
you
there was
can
a
just-
slide on it, but
oh.
yeah, that's fine. If you want, at 3 o'clock, the PPG is going to have a draw, so just business cards. So we have a textbook called Sustainable Business that came out earlier this month.
Who wrote that, Bruce?
I did, yeah. And it's basically what I didn't learn in engineering and business school that I wish I'd learned. And so it's a really good resource. It also goes together with a course if you want, that EMC Green Skills it's called. If you Google that, you find it. It's like an 8-week course while you're at work. And you actually implement a project during that course. And so Karen and her colleague were on an edition of that course. The next one's May 6th, I think it's starting. And so, but anyway, the book draw is then, and so you're more than welcome to participate in that.
Sure. And there are some other resources there
Yeah.
too from Enviro Stewards. So please do visit the PPG table. So I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to all our panelists for their time, for sharing their experience and perspectives. I think you've given us a lot to think about, from navigating change to driving meaningful impact, and also to the audience for sharing this conversation. This engagement is so important from your end as well. And we hope that these conversations will continue to spark action and dialogue beyond this panel. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's-
Thank you, Chaya, Sanders, Bruce, and Karen. It was wonderful to hear from you today. Just want to let the room know that we'll have just a little bit of a 10-minute bio break, use the facilities, whatnot, and they'll reconvene here for our last panel for the day, Panel D, which is presented by Altitude Accelerator. We are going to learn from and hear from green innovation and some of the clean tech and companies and startups coming out of that space. So grab a drink, use the facilities, and then meet back here in about 10 minutes.